Hey everybody, I'm Dustin. For those of you who may have missed my introduction video, so critical race theory. This was interesting. This was not something that I was familiar with until I started reading the material. So this was really cool to learn about. So a time that I witnessed institutionalized racism. So I used to work at Birch Tree Communities, which is an outpatient clinic for patients with serious or severe mental illness. Um, about 40% of the patients or clients that we saw were were minority groups, African Americans, Hispanic, or otherwise. What was interesting was not a single staff member outside of our clinical director who had almost no face-to-face contact with our clients was he was our only minority. And a big part of that was, in my opinion, institutionalized racism. When the hiring manager is white, the therapists were white, all of us mental health paraprofessionals, we were white, um, and the time that we did have one African student, she wasn't African American, she was from Africa. I went to graduate school with her, and I recommended that she come to work at Birch Tree because she was interested in mental health. Um, she ended up not getting the job for one reason or another, um, and in my mind that was a perfect opportunity for us to introduce some diversity to our staff so that we could have more than one race represented in our staff. Um, otherwise, I can't really say that I experienced a whole lot of institutionalized racism because of the fact that I am white. Um, the simple fact that I hold that privilege. You have to excuse me. I've got allergies going on today. Um, I think the fact that I am white and I experience the privilege of being white has shielded me in a way from a lot of institutionalized racism in my life. So in this stage, I was in my early 20s, so I was in that intimacy versus isolation group, and in a way, I was isolated and prevented from developing any sort of intimate sort of relationship with anybody that was outside of my own race group within employment, which seemed a little bit odd because most everybody that worked there was at least educated at a bachelor's level. And so we were all privy to the idea of racism and institutionalized racism because I'm sure everyone there had at least an introductory sociology class, which is where a lot of that is discussed. When it comes when it comes around to challenging institutionalized racism, I think that the National Education Association had a pretty good idea, which was to point it out. Um, make note of it to the people that are in power, and it's that old thing. If you see something, say something. I think that's a really good way for us to counter institutionalized racism. Um, this experience that I had was one that opened my eyes to the fact that if you don't say anything, if you don't take a moment to challenge I suppose we could call it the system as a whole. If you don't take the time to challenge it, um, then it's certainly not going to change. We can't wait for those that are in higher privilege to make the change. We have to be the change. One of the things that we did while serving our clients and helping them overcome their symptoms was to be an advocate for them. Um, and I think that with 40% of our population being African American or Hispanic, um, having a staff member that would represent them on that level would have been hugely beneficial. But we were not given that opportunity because our one applicant that we had um, was excluded from that, and she was highly qualified. I mean, she was a master's level student at the time, focusing on clinical psychology like myself. But here I was sitting in this position that um, I felt like she also deserved a shot at this. And if I'm going to be perfectly honest, she was a better student than I was. So if anybody deserved it, it was her over me. But I had to I had to reconcile that, and it was a challenge to say, well, I'm going to hold on to this rather than giving up my position to somebody who is probably more deserving. And I do feel some guilt over that to this day. But in the past, I never considered institutionalized racism until I went to college and experienced the learning environment that provided me the opportunity to grow as a human. If I could go back, I would have said something. I like to think I would anyway. Um, I would have said, hey, we'll call the hiring manager Tammy. I said, hey Tammy, we needed representation. Why didn't that applicant make the cut? Was there something about it that didn't work? Was she? Did you feel she was underqualified, maybe overqualified? I don't know. But I think that stopping and saying something and addressing it and developing and developing the inclusion that Constance Huggins mentioned in our reading material this week. Developing that inclusion is going to be the only way that we can begin the diversity process in these sort of homogenous societies that we develop for ourselves. And I think in a way, the work environment is its own society. So, with that in mind, I really like to think that in the future, as a social worker, I'll be able to challenge these things. I'll be able to promote inclusion and all of those things that we as future social workers seek according to our code of ethics. And I have to say I'm really excited to get going on that. That sounds really cool. So, with that in mind, I'm going to wrap it up. I don't want to go over. I hope you guys are having a wonderful time, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.